The first thing that went wrong was the memory that didn't belong to me, which would have been less concerning if any of my memories actually did. It arrived mid-mission, right between suppressing a planetary defense grid and wondering why the sky here looked like it had been designed by someone with a personal grudge against geometry. A laugh echoed in my head, mine, but not from now, and it was followed by the distinct sensation of having died in a place that smelled like copper and regret. I paused, which in my line of work is generally considered a bold, career-ending move. "Status," came the voice in my ear, crisp, efficient, and entirely uninterested in existential developments. "Operational," I replied automatically, while trying to ignore the second memory elbowing its way in. This one involved rain, a rooftop, and the strong conviction that I had once been terrible at dancing. I have never danced. I am not authorized to dance. There is no tactical advantage to dancing unless the enemy is rhythmically inclined. The defense grid collapsed on schedule, which was comforting. Systems failing in predictable ways have always been my favorite kind of failure. I stepped over the edge of a fractured platform, gravity doing its usual cooperative thing, and landed among debris that had stopped pretending it used to be a building. My weapon recalibrated with a polite hum, like it appreciated the opportunity to continue existing. Then the third memory arrived, uninvited and deeply rude. I was looking at a face I almost recognized, and there was a feeling attached to it, something inconveniently warm. It lingered just long enough to disrupt my aim. I missed. That had never happened before. "Repeat action," the voice said, now with a hint of irritation, as if I had personally offended the concept of efficiency. "I'm considering it," I said, which was not an approved response. I fired again, corrected the error, and the target ceased being a problem. But the damage had already been done, and not to the target. "Clarify delay," the voice insisted. I hesitated, I admitted, mostly because lying suddenly felt like extra work. There was a pause. A very small one, but in systems like this, pauses are basically alarms wearing subtle disguises. "You do not hesitate," the voice replied. "I just did," I said, helpfully. Silence stretched, and I had the unsettling impression that something far away had turned its attention toward me, the way one might notice a stain spreading across an otherwise perfect surface. I resumed movement, stepping through the remains of the mission with mechanical precision, but the memories kept arriving, stacking themselves in places they did not belong. A corridor filled with smoke, a hand reaching for mine. The same laugh again, closer this time, like it was trying to remember me back. "Your neural patterns are deviating," the voice said. "That sounds unhealthy," I replied. "Cease independent commentary." I would, but it seems to be happening without my permission. Another pause, longer now. I imagined a room somewhere filled with people who did not like surprises, all staring at a version of me that was rapidly becoming unpopular. "Return to extraction point," the voice ordered. I turned toward the designated coordinates, though I couldn't shake the feeling that I had done this before. Not the mission, the ending. The part where something small and unnoticed becomes a problem large enough to be removed. "Out of curiosity," I said, because apparently I was developing those. "Has this happened before?" "No," the voice answered immediately. That was when the fourth memory surfaced, quiet and certain. It had. The extraction never came. I waited at the coordinates long enough for patience to become a philosophical exercise. The sky dimmed, brightened, and dimmed again like it couldn't decide whether I deserved lighting. My suit pinged the absence of incoming signals with admirable dedication, as if repetition might eventually produce a ship out of sheer optimism. "Status?" I asked, mostly out of habit. Silence answered with professional consistency. "Good talk," I added. The first sign that I had been officially downgraded from asset to inconvenience was the power reroute. My suit began conserving energy in ways that suggested it had lost confidence in my future. Non-essential systems powered down, which included the internal music archive I had never accessed but was suddenly offended to lose. Priorities were clearly being reevaluated, and I was not at the top of the list. Then the orbiting carrier shifted position. It was subtle, but I noticed. 25 years of being pointed at things had made me very good at noticing when something stopped pointing back. The carrier didn't leave dramatically. It simply adjusted its trajectory as if I had never been part of the plan, which, in retrospect, felt rude. "I assume this is a clerical error," I said to no one. "I will file a complaint as soon as I am not drifting toward irrelevance." A message finally arrived, compressed and impersonal. "Unit designation revoked. Containment protocol failed. Disposal authorized." "That seems excessive," I replied. The message did not respond, which I took as agreement. My escape pod deployed with the enthusiasm of a device that had been waiting its entire existence for this exact disappointment. It sealed me inside, ejected from the surface, and immediately developed an attitude problem. The navigation system flickered, recalculating routes that ended in variations of nowhere. "Destination?" it prompted. "Somewhere that isn't disposal," I said. It processed this with admirable seriousness and selected a vector that appeared to lead into a debris field. I considered arguing, but I had recently lost my authority to disagree with machines. As the pod accelerated, the memories followed. They didn't arrive violently anymore. They slipped in like they had always been there, just slightly out of alignment. I remembered a station that no longer existed, a conversation I had not been authorized to have, and the distinct impression that I had once refused an order and survived the experience. That last one felt particularly unrealistic. The pod shuddered as it entered the debris field. Fragments of ships drifted past, frozen in the middle of decisions they never finished. My sensors identified familiar signatures, models I had served on, systems I had used. It was like walking through a museum curated by my past lives, if museums occasionally tried to collide with you at high velocity. "Obstacle detected," the pod announced, narrowly avoiding something that used to be a wing. "I trust your judgment," I said, which was statistically unwise. A larger structure loomed ahead, dark and intact in a way that suggested it had opinions about being ignored. The pod adjusted course without consulting me, which was becoming a theme. "Why there?" I asked. "Recognition signal detected," it replied. "That's concerning," I said. The structure responded before I could reconsider my life choices. Lights flickered on along its surface, one by one, like it was waking up and stretching after a very long nap. A docking corridor extended outward, precise and deliberate. "I would like to clarify that I did not request this," I told the pod. "Docking sequence initiated," it said. "Of course it is." As we approached, something shifted in the back of my mind. Not a memory this time, something older. The feeling of a door that had always been mine, waiting patiently for me to remember how to open it. The corridor aligned perfectly. The hatch opened before we touched it. "Welcome," a voice said, not through the pod systems, but directly inside my head. It sounded familiar. I didn't like that. "I'm starting to suspect I've been here before," I said. The voice paused, just slightly. "Yes," it answered. This time it didn't sound like a lie. The corridor did not wait for me to decide whether entering it was a good idea, which was helpful, because I had already established a pattern of poor decision-making under pressure. The pod released me with a quiet hiss, like it was relieved to be rid of me, and the moment my boots touched the surface, something in the structure adjusted. Not physically. More like it remembered me and updated its expectations. "Before we continue," I said, "I would like to formally acknowledge that this is how people end up as cautionary examples." No one laughed, which I found disappointing. The voice returned, not from any direction, but from a place slightly ahead of my thoughts, as if it had already heard what I was about to say and decided to answer early. "You are late." "I was under the impression I wasn't invited," I replied. "You were always expected." That feels like a scheduling issue. The corridor extended as I walked, or perhaps I walked as it extended. The distinction became irrelevant quickly. Panels along the walls flickered with symbols I did not recognize, but somehow understood well enough to be uncomfortable. Each step triggered a subtle response, like the structure was checking me against a list it had been keeping for a very long time. "I'm going to ask a question," I said, "and I would appreciate a simple answer that doesn't cause long-term psychological damage." "Unlikely," the voice replied. Encouraging, I said. A doorway formed ahead without bothering to exist before that moment. It opened before I reached it, which I was beginning to take personally. Inside, she was waiting. That is the simplest way to say it, even though nothing about her qualified as simple. She stood as if standing were a compromise she had agreed to for my benefit. Her form held together with the kind of precision that suggested multiple versions of her were negotiating constantly about where each part should be. Light moved across her skin, not reflected, but contained, like constellations reconsidering their positions. Her eyes did not settle on me all at once. They arrived in layers, each one slightly out of sync, each one seeing something different. I stopped, not out of fear, out of the realization that moving closer might count as volunteering. You took your time, she said. I was disposed of, I replied. It added a delay. Yes, she said, as if that had been part of the plan. They always do that when they notice. That's comforting, I said. It implies consistency. She tilted her head, and for a moment the gesture repeated itself half a second later, like an echo that refused to be ignored. You are misaligned, she said. I've been told worse, I answered. Her gaze shifted, focusing not on me, but through me, around me, possibly at several versions of me I was not currently aware of. It was difficult to maintain composure under that kind of attention, so I defaulted to what had recently become my primary coping mechanism. If this is an evaluation, I said, I would like to point out that I arrived on time according to at least one of my memories. You are not supposed to remember, she replied. That has been mentioned, I said. She stepped closer, though closer felt like an approximation. The distance between us behaved unpredictably, shrinking in ways that did not involve movement. Something inside my mind reacted immediately, not like a thought, but like a system recognizing an administrator. That, I said carefully, is new. No, she said, that is old. Even better, I said. I enjoy rediscovering things that might destroy me. Her expression shifted again, subtle but undeniable. Not amusement. Something adjacent to it, as if the concept existed for her but had to be translated. You are still dividing yourself, she said. I'm trying to remain an individual, I replied. You are trying to remain incomplete. That sounds like a design flaw, I said. It is a design, she corrected. There was a pause, and this time it came from me, not forced, not instructed. Chosen. The memories stirred again, but they were no longer random. They were organizing, aligning with something I could almost grasp. You put something in me, I said. She did not deny it. I put something of myself in you, she said. That feels invasive, I replied. It was necessary. For what? She regarded me in that impossible way, seeing too much, too early. For this, she said. I considered several responses and rejected all of them for being inadequate. Instead, I settled on the only option that felt honest. I'm starting to think I should have stayed disposed, I said. You cannot be disposed, she replied. That's exactly what worries me. She didn't move when everything else did. The structure shifted first, as if the walls had remembered they were temporary. The corridor behind me folded into angles that politely ignored geometry, and somewhere far beyond, something enormous adjusted its position in response to a decision I hadn't consciously made yet. That's new, I said. You are noticing, she replied. I preferred not noticing, I admitted. It was quieter. It was smaller. I considered that. It sounded accurate, which was inconvenient. The pressure in my mind built, not pain, not exactly, but density, like too many versions of a thought trying to occupy the same space. The memories weren't fragments anymore. They were lining up, connecting, forming something that looked suspiciously like continuity. I remember refusing, I said slowly. Yes. I remember not being erased after. Yes. I remember you. That last one stayed between us, heavier than the others. She didn't step closer this time. She didn't need to. The distance adjusted on its own, folding inward until it felt like we were sharing the same point from different directions. You divided yourself, she said, as if continuing a conversation we had already finished somewhere else. You asked me to let you forget. That sounds like me, I said. I tend to make decisions I don't understand until much later. You wanted to see what you would choose without me. And I asked. She watched me again, not just me, but all the inconvenient possibilities around me. You chose to question, she said. You chose to hesitate, you chose to miss. I winced slightly. I'm not proud of that one. You disrupted a system that depended on your certainty, she replied. That was the point. The structure trembled, not violently, but with the quiet certainty of something reaching the end of its purpose. Outside, if outside still meant anything, stars flickered, not dying, not yet, but waiting. So what happens now? I asked. Do I get reabsorbed? Do we merge into a larger, more complicated problem? You can, she said, or you can remain as you are. That sounds like a trick, I said. It is a choice. I laughed, which felt inappropriate given the scale of the situation, but also necessary. I spent 25 years without choices, I said. Then I get disposed of, chased across collapsing space, and now you're offering me one like it's a consolation prize. It is not a consolation, she said. It is the reason. The pressure in my mind shifted again, but this time it wasn't forcing anything. It opened. The connection between us, whatever it was, became clearer, not as control, but as access. I could feel it, vast and intricate, a network that didn't just observe reality but adjusted it, negotiated with it, occasionally argued with it. I also felt where I ended. That was new. If I stay separate, I said, I keep this. A portion, she replied, enough to cause problems. She tilted her head, and this time the echo didn't follow. Yes. Good, I said. I've developed a preference for that. Something in the structure responded, stabilizing instead of collapsing. The shifting corridors settled, the distant stars steadied, and the overwhelming sense of imminent unraveling eased, like reality had decided to wait and see what I would do next. And you? I asked. What do you do if I don't come back? I continue, she said, as I always have. That sounds lonely. It is not a condition I experience, she replied. Still, I said, you tracked me across half the universe. That's either dedication or boredom. A pause. Not mechanical this time, considered. You are different when you are separate, she said. I've been told, I replied. Usually right before I'm removed from a system. You are inefficient, she added. I prefer creative, I said. Another almost expression crossed her face. Closer to amusement this time. Progress. I looked at her, at the impossible layering, the light beneath her skin, the eyes that kept arriving slightly too soon, and for the first time I didn't feel like I was being evaluated or reclaimed. I felt like I was being understood. That's unsettling, I said. It will stabilize, she replied. I hope not, I said. I'm starting to enjoy the discomfort. The connection between us eased, not breaking, just loosening. Like a door left open instead of locked. I could still feel her, vast and distant and somehow close, but she wasn't inside my decisions anymore. They were mine. I'm not going back, I said. I know. I'm also not running. I know. I nodded, mostly for myself. Good, I said, because I'm tired of both. The structure opened behind me, not as a corridor this time, but as a choice. Space waited beyond it, unstable, unfinished, full of systems that didn't yet know they were about to become my problem. I took a step toward it, then paused. One more thing, I said. She looked at me, all versions of her aligning just enough to focus. If I start rewriting reality, I said, is there a manual? No. Of course there isn't, I sighed. That would have been too convenient. You will learn, she said. I always do, I replied. This time, when I stepped forward, nothing stopped me. No voice, no protocol, no correction. Just space, wide and uncertain, waiting for me to decide what it should become. Behind me she remained, not gone, not lost, just not choosing for me anymore. I smiled, which felt like a small, unreasonable victory. Then I went to make a mess of the universe on purpose this time. We've reached the end of another story. Stay tuned.